over the last few years, easily offended people who have too much time on their hands have alleged that things like milk, chess, music theory, spelling and grammar, ice cream, the ability to use a knife and fork, turning up for work on time, and even the cosmos itself are all apparently forms of white supremacy. Well, now there's a new one. I've got a couple of clips from the Twitter account The Libs of TikTok. So now in 2023, if you believe in and understand very basic biology, you're now a racist.
You know, one of the reasons why cis people think they're real or natural or the default is because they've fallen into the trap of the myth of white supremacy. Yup, they're connected. So if you think things like trans women aren't women, or if you call people trans but then refuse to call yourself cis if you're cis, that means that you have been influenced by one of the original influencers. The twin siblings of colonialism and the myth of white supremacy. And those twin influencer siblings get paid by capitalism to influence. They have literally influenced you to believe that there is a version of a man and a woman that is more human than all the other versions. Sound familiar? Yep. White dominant culture, colonialism, capitalism, they've been working real hard on us. Remember, just like with any influencer trend that is toxic, we don't have to believe it and we don't have to follow it. And in fact, we can even point out the ludicrousness and make it completely obsolete.
Before I even get into this, why is it that everyone who's involved with the gender ideology movement are so utterly hideous? They talk about there being more than men and women, but all of them are so horribly unfuckable. I mean, that thing there was clearly female. If I was desperate, I'd take a blowjob off her, just because that way she might shut the fuck up for 5 minutes. So let's start this. I believe in basic biology, however, I am not a white supremacist. But in saying that, I know there are people on the far left who, just because of the colour of my skin, would say that I'm a racist. Which, when you think about it, is quite a racist thing to say. As usual, because trans people are being discussed, I'll say again, if you're watching this and you are trans, I wish you the very best on your journey. I believe the vast majority of trans people are just trying to live their lives, but it's the toxic minority and their allies that cause the problem. So, do I think that trans women are women? That's a complicated one. I think trans women should have rights, they should have respect, they should be treated decently by other people, but no, I don't think trans women are women, and to be honest, no one sane actually does. At best, trans women are men who've been surgically modified to appear more female. That isn't white supremacy, that's basic biology. In the same way that I'm male, I know that a trans man isn't the same as me. Because being a man, I have XY chromosomes and I produce semen. And aside from birth defect, accident or medical intervention, I'll say, rather than transition, that's something that all proper men, real men, cis men, we'll get into that, do. In fact, if someone medically transitions, they have to be on hormones for the rest of their lives. Which sadly, given the alarming rates of self-deletion of trans people, often that isn't for very long. A serious point here is that over 90% of teenagers who identify as being trans essentially grow out of it. It's a phase, a confusion around puberty. But since being trans became more fashionable, the rates of misdiagnosis have skyrocketed. For young women, many of those who are diagnosed as being transgender are actually autistic. So these are people with information processing problems. So if you take a young woman who's depressed and can't find her place in the world, I doubt that making her grow a beard and chopping her tits off will cheer her up. As for the point about being cisgendered and not wanting to be labelled as cisgendered, well, I utterly reject that label when it applies to me. I'm not cisgendered, I'm normal. And I know this might sound cruel, but if over 99% of the population identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, then those people are normal. Those that don't are the abnormality. Not only that, but cisgendered is a term that's become weaponised by trans activists. Usually, like we saw in the video, when someone can't explain themselves, or if they're losing an argument, they bung cisgendered in there as a sticking plaster. But most importantly, I reject the term cisgendered because it was coined by a German sexologist who advocated for paedophilia. So nothing about me do I want associated with a kiddie fiddling kraut. All of the ranty stuff about capitalism I think's just filler. Because let's be honest, capitalism bought the iPhone she filmed that fucking TikTok on. And understanding biology, again, has nothing to do with white supremacy. Until very recently, if you said that a man could have a baby, you'd be locked away for your own safety. And the thing is, we all know men can't have babies. If someone gives birth, that's a biological female, no matter what she fucking identifies as. In the same way that we all know, if we go out on a Friday night and we meet a pretty girlie called Tracy, who's 6'8" with 5 o'clock shadow, that's a biological man. The argument falls apart even further with the idea that white supremacy is responsible for the way we view, say, sex and gender, because that would suggest that only white cultures and civilizations would impose those rules. Now, I know the ancient Egyptians had very clear roles for men and women, and we also know the ancient Egyptians weren't white. Although it's got a bit confusing if you're watching Netflix, because now Cleopatra is African and black, even though she was white and Greek. I'll go as far as this. I believe since the dawn of humanity, there have only been men and women. Yes, there have been effeminate men and masculine women. There have been people from both sexes who cross-dress. There's been transvestites, there's been drag, but it's only in the last couple of decades people are asking us to deny reality, to appease a tiny percentage of the population. In fact, it's a tiny percentage of that tiny percentage. So I reject the labels of being a white supremacist or cisgendered. However, what happens if you get someone who's desperate for all the labels society can impose upon them to maximise their victimhood? Strap yourself in for this.
Hi, I'm Cody. I primarily go by E, M, or Z as pronouns, but I'm comfortable being referred to using any neopronouns that are not Z here. And a little bit about who I am. I am a white, transmasculine, femme, non-binary, disabled, neurodivergent, obsessive-compulsive, chronically ill, Unitarian Universalist, raised Jewish, non-monogamous, demi-low romantic, grey demi-bisexual, survivor of acute and complex trauma, millennial, and cat parent in mental health.
Bugger me backwards. Could you keep up with that? Because I couldn't. How many labels does that person want? How oppressed do they need to prove that they are? And the last one, because I think it will be clipped in the fade, is mental health recovery. No, love, you haven't. You have got serious problems. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the tirade of mental illness that TikTok is meting out on the Western world. So I will say this. If the choice is either identifying like that person, where everything in my life makes me a victim, or having others call me a white supremacist, I'm sad to say I need a set of jack boots and a panzer tank. As ever, thanks for watching.